Palmyra operators are licensed per area, and the layout of the mobile telephone cells and the LMR, land mobile radio, are looked at for the particular area. We have studied the electromagnetic interference from the wind turbines to these systems, to these repeaters, or to the cell base stations. And we have found that unless they're closer than about 10 meters, there is no electromagnetic interference. The structures themselves can cause some shadowing, but the way these systems operate, if it turns out that one cell doesn't get the call, it switches to a second cell. So it's very easy to overcome the issues that exist when you have wind turbines and mobile radio, land mobile radio, or cell mobile telephone. And the reason for that is the way the systems are designed, that if your circuit doesn't connect one way, it will connect another. And one of the ways that you can mitigate this, which is pretty straightforward, is you can always add a repeater for the land mobile radio or add a base station for the cell type telephones in order to achieve the coverage that you had before. We look at AM and FM radio. And for AM radio, if the systems are omnidirectional, that is, they have a non-directional antenna, it radiates, or the coverage is totally around the station's antenna, you have to have a separation, or you would like to have a separation of 0.6 of a mile. If you have a directed antenna, you'd like to have a separation from any wind turbine of roughly 2 miles. However, if you don't get that, you can evaluate it to see exactly how the system is going to be set up. But the mitigation, or the way you get around this, is you try to locate your turbines with that type of separation. And the same thing exists for FM, but the issue is a little different for FM radio. For FM radio, it's a line of sight type of coverage. So you want to make sure that you keep the obstruction of that station to a minimum. However, you may be able to get good coverage by changing the position of the transmitting antenna or making sure how you site your wind turbines. One thing about the FM wavelength is the fact that it is large enough, or I should say long enough, so that it wraps around wind blades and towers, and actually the amount of attenuation you get, if it is in the path, is minimized. We've seen a lot of development over the last 10 years in the wind development area, and TV reception issues have come up, but they're the exception rather than the rule. In other words, in all of the things that have occurred in the United States, the area where you get issues with television coverage isn't when the wind turbines are close to the transmitting antenna, but it's where the wind turbines are at the fringe of the coverage for the television station. In other words, what happens is those stations whose signal is fairly marginal to begin with, those stations' signal will be attenuated, and if it's attenuated, it might be lost at the margin. So this would be at the contour of the coverage right at that maximum range, if you have turbines built in that area, those people at that location might have a problem receiving their television once the turbines go in. Some of the problems that occurred early on with television was back in the 2000 to 2005, probably half the stations or more were analog. Analog stations suffered ghosting and other types of reflection that really distort a picture. And if you were in that marginal zone, you would get ghosting and things of that nature. However, when the transition to digital television occurred, many of these problems went away. Because unlike an analog signal, the digital signal is a data stream. As long as that data stream is delivered and no interruption occurs in the synchronization of that data stream, and you have signal that is strong enough, you will get good video. It's only when it goes below that threshold that produces good video where the digital television reception is affected. So actually, digital television has improved the conditions that exist now. The way we go about examining the TV reception in an area is we identify all of the TV stations within 100 miles of where the site is going to go in. And then we take the position of the wind turbines and the communities in the area, and we try to figure out what is going to happen in that area. And those TV stations that we are most concerned about are those stations that might be right at 40 to 45 miles away. Because generally speaking, for a full power station, those are the ones that might have their coverage in that area lost. We estimate the signal attenuation and what is known as multipath to estimate, what is going to happen in those particular areas. And we have software programs that take into account propagation and the conditions of producing good video and different terrain models that we use to determine whether there's going to be a problem with reception. And we try to estimate the number of households that would be affected. The way we operate, it's the same way we do the microwave. We try to do a worst-case analysis. The worst-case analysis tells us how bad it would be kind of as a maximum condition. And from that, if we know that there's not going to be a problem, then we feel reasonably sure that it won't exist. And that's the type of analysis we try to do. This shows you a diagram of the full power stations in the United States at this time. This came from our database, and you can see it's very hard not to have wind turbines built in any of the areas around the country without having some interaction with television. So it's one of those things that you have to look at, realistically, and you have to evaluate it and come up with a plan of action with regard to an installation. Now I'm going to talk about a particular system that affects the situation here, and it involves WLNB. We looked at WLNB's coverage, and we were trying to determine, what was going to happen with their coverage once wind turbines are installed. Now, you have that classic case. The WLNB's transmitter is very close to where the wind turbines are going to be placed. We don't know exactly where they're going to be for this particular project, but we know what size they're going to be and the fact that they're going to be somewhere in that area outlined in blue. One of the things that's happened in the past, there's been a couple of studies done, I think 3 in all, that was very alarming. It made it look like WLNB wasn't going to be able to get the coverage they had before. But it was a quality, it wasn't a quantification, it was a qualitative type of look. We sat down and we did our analysis where we wanted to quantify exactly how a turbine or how turbines installed in the planned area for Blissfield would affect the coverage of WLNB. And what we did was we took the FCC criteria for excellent video, which is 35 dB above a microvolt per meter. We used the software that is called path loss, and we used an algorithm which is a terrestrial integrated rough earth model. It takes into account the curvature of the earth, but it also takes into account the terrain that exists here in this area. And it is all computerized. We took the conditions of the parameters for the station, which has an antenna height of 512 feet. We took their transmit power, their frequency of operation, which is 79 megahertz. Now 79 megahertz is below the FM band, and what I said about FM being able to curve around turbine blades and towers and things like that, this particular wavelength is even larger, wider than the FM band's wavelength. We took the planned turbine dimensions, which had a height of it has a hub height of 312 feet and a rotor diameter of 328 feet. And in our analysis, we came up with what the levels will be at various distances away from a turbine that was placed 1 mile from the WLNB transmitter. And what we found was that in every case, the signal that would be received, we calculated the signal before the wind turbine was installed and after it was installed, and in every case, the level will be high enough to produce good video. Now the difference between this study and the studies that were done before was, in the studies before, where they were trying to show that the coverage would go away, it doesn't go away, the reception doesn't go away. The signal is reduced, but it's not eliminated. It's diminished, but it's still high enough to produce good video. So, I'm ready to go on. In conclusion, the operational contour WMLB will be unaffected by the presence of the wind turbines. What happens at the maximum range, the signal skims over the top of the wind turbines, so it is not obstructed at all. The signal strength within the Blissfield Wind Energy Project area will be high enough to produce good video because it's so close to the antenna. So you won't have a problem in that area either. And in all the ranges in between, you'll still have good reception levels. Even though they're slightly diminished, they will be high enough to produce good video.